Today we're going to go over how to create a still life sketch. Uh, Sketching typically informs paintings, idea concepts for uh, all sorts of future projects. So I recommend whatever you decide to embark on, do a series of sketches. So what I'm doing here right now is I usually create a bounding box for for my composition. I decide, is it going to be a square format, a horizontal format, a vertical format? So once I create my bounding box for the format that I'm going to use, I quickly pencil in significant marks along the still, in this case, it's a still life. So what I'm doing is I'm paying close attention to the big shapes. I'm looking at the fabric as a big shape within the picture plane, and the lemons in the still life are my smaller shapes. I'm paying close attention to the movement, the direction that the light is coming in, and the direction that the fabric is moving. All these were intentional when initially I set up the still life. I paid really close attention to composition. Um, in that way, a sketch is really going to help develop stronger compositions. Uh, Sketching is an inexpensive way of experimenting with composition. And as an artist, it's really vital to study, to experiment with different ways of doing things. You may experiment with value, color, uh, and composition. So when I started this still life, I decided I did want to go with a horizontal format. I decided what I wanted my light source to be. These lemons are backlit, and then the light comes into the scene and spills across the fabric. Uh, so while looking at my still life, I have a little photo in the upper left hand corner of what I'm looking at while I'm sketching. I'm just paying attention to the larger shapes and smaller shapes, and how do I want those shapes to move within the picture plane. Typically, you have an entry, ideally from the left, and you read left to right or right to left. So I put in the big shapes. I put in lightly sketched in with an H pencil. I sketched in the fabric, and I placed the lemons in where in their respective places. I paid close attention as to how they are interacting with each other. Is there a lemon in front of a lemon? And paying really close attention to the negative spaces. So once you have your objects placed where you want them, the next step is what I'm doing right now is I'm sketching in my midtone values. Value is very, very important as a tool to move the eyer's view through the sketch or the drawing or the painting. So I'm deciding where are my shadows. So using either an F or an HB pencil, you can start to sketch in your mid-tone values. I'm just putting in all of the shadow areas with my F pencil. As I sketch in the fabric, I am paying close attention to the direction that the fabric is moving, and I can, with my sketch lines, indicate that movement. So you can move your pencil in the direction that the object, the form, is moving. So that's what I'm trying to do here. With my shadows, I'm moving those shadows away from the lemon, and right now I'm rendering those shadows and I'm working them around the lemon. So I'm moving them in the direction of the form of the lemon. So I'm looking at, once again, the form of the lemon. So I'm rendering in the core shadow and cast shadows of these lemons. There's a cast shadow on the fabric. Putting in your cast shadows and your core shadows are really going to help to define space, distance, foreground, midground, background. Still working on my midtones. I'm putting in the shadows with a midtone value, maybe about a 50% gray. And then I will go in later and darken in some of those shadow areas. Keeping in mind that your shadows are transparent, they will go from dark to light. And leaving all of my light areas empty at this point. So at this stage of the drawing, we're just putting in all the shadow areas, which would be the core shadow and the cast shadow. Sketching fabric and round shapes like lemons or apples is a wonderful way to develop your sense of form, really understanding form and how light falls upon a surface. If you'd like to strengthen your figure drawing or portraiture skills, starting with simple forms, simple shapes like fruit or vegetables is a wonderful way to really develop your eye, to pay close attention to value changes as light moves across a surface. Fabric is another wonderful way. All these small little exercises will help to inform much larger projects. The advantage to setting up a simple still life is an opportunity to really strengthen your observation skills without trying to take on too large of a project. Just doing small, simple 20-minute to 40-minute sketches in your sketchbook will really help to develop your observation skills, your ability to pay close attention to subtle value changes. Those very subtle value changes will really help to make a drawing or a painting really be refined and stand out. It is really often the value pattern that you have within a composition that really helps that drawing or painting to really engage the viewer. So right now I'm paying close attention to where the shadows get darker and deeper. Keep in mind in the shadow area, you're going to have your darkest shadow area, and then you're going to have a midtone in your shadow area. And creating variety or depth in the shadow area can really enhance a drawing or a painting. So this is a really great exercise to decide as the artist, where do you want to add emphasis? Emphasis is created by the contrast between the light side of an object and the dark side of an object. So I'm creating emphasis and contrast right now where the light is hitting that lemon to the left, and behind that lemon is a shadow area. It really helps to draw the viewer's eye into the picture plane. So in this particular sketch, I'm using shadow to the left of the lemons, spilling over off the page to the left to bring the viewer in from the left with the shadow and then into the still life. And these are just compositional tricks that you can use to enhance the viewer's experience, to create unity, to allow the viewer to move through the composition without having the eye jump all around, but to move gracefully through the composition with a sense of unity and harmony in the drawing. So the light is hitting that large foreground area in the fabric. So I'm moving from a shadow to the light side. And right here, I'm just emphasizing that core shadow. The core shadow on an object is the darkest area of the object. It's the area of the object where the least amount of light is hitting it. Now there will be some reflective light bouncing up into that lemon in the foreground. So the darkest area will be right along the core shadow, where I'm going into that core shadow right now. And this is what really helps to turn the form and give that lemon that sense of a three-dimensional quality. Notice I'm not going to make that shadow side really hard all around, but I'm allowing some light to bounce back up into the lemon, the reflective light, and that will help that lemon to give that sense of a three-dimensional quality. In the background lemons, I'm using the cast shadow of that central lemon to indicate the light edge of the lemon in front of it. So rather than drawing using a line to create the edge of a lemon, you can use the shadow behind it to define the front edge that might be lighter in the shadow area behind it. So while you're working with still life or landscape or portraiture, pay close attention to your edges on your objects. You don't have to draw the whole object. You're going to think about how and when do you use line and how are you going to use value. You don't have to put in too much information. Putting a line or a hard edge on an object has a tendency to flatten it. So it's up to the artist to decide when they would want an object to appear flat and when would you want that object to feel more three-dimensional. So it's better to keep your edges soft and render the value of the core shadow and cast shadow if you want to give your objects that three-dimensional feeling. I'm going in with the kneaded eraser right now, just picking up some light values where the light is spilling across the lemon and spilling across the fabric. Just wanting to go in there and reinforce the contrast between the light side and the dark side. All right, once again, I'm breaking up any edges that might cause the drawing to break up the movement. I do like the light spilling across this piece of fabric in the foreground. I like softening that edge as it falls off of the picture plane. It does give that feeling of movement and light. So now I'm moving into the final stage of refinement, and I'm just going in and making the cast shadows a little bit darker where they're closer to the object, and the form shadow a little bit darker right where the light changes from dark to light. Don't worry about getting too dark at the beginning when you're putting in your midtones, because this last stage of the drawing right now is where I'm refining those darker shadow areas. What I'm using now is a 6B pencil. So to put in those deeper, darker shadow values, I'm using a 6B. So throughout this sketch, I've used 3 different pencils. I've used an H, which is a harder lead, to lightly sketch in the basic shapes. And then I've used an F, or you can use an HB, to sketch in the midtone values. And then with my dark shadow areas, I'm using a 6B, and I am using a kneaded eraser to just pick up any values that to lighten any dark areas, or pick up any values that I don't want to have in the drawing. So in this final stage of refinement, I'm just going into the light area and very softly indicating the light side of the lemon. And by doing this, it helps to give that lemon a feeling of three-dimensionality. I'm not letting the light side just stay white, but just putting in a very, very light value with my H pencil. So when you set up your still life, try to do a minimum of 3 different setups. If you're out doing landscape drawing, try to look at the same view from 3 different viewpoints.